Welcome to this week's Eternal Monday, where Malamar from Forbidden Light faces off against Weezing from EX Deoxys. If you're new here, you might be wondering what the heck even is the Eternal format. In short, it is the unlimited format with a ban list. So this means the format features cards from the original base set all the way through to the most recent tournament legal set. Although it's an unofficial format, it's an incredibly fun format with a lot of rich deck building and gameplay experience to be had. If you're interested in learning more about the Eternal format, you can do so at justinbasil.com/eternal. Up first, we have Malamar Box. Malamar Box, of course, is featuring the Malamar from Forbidden Light with the Psychic Recharge ability. If you are familiar with the Flaffy from the current standard format that is very popular at the moment in Maridon decks, then you'll be very familiar with its ability. It attaches a Psychic energy from your discard pile to one of your benched Pokemon. So not lightning like Flaffy, but same idea. So you're going to be using Malamar to attach a bunch of energy to your benched Pokemon and then using them to attack your opponent's active Pokemon. Your main attacker in this deck is Giratina from Lost Thunder, which has an ability that allows it to pull itself out of the discard pile and onto your bench, and in the process put a damage counter on 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And then it has an attack that does a decent amount of damage in exchange for hurting one of your own Pokemon. The deck also has access to Giratina level X, so if you have a Giratina in the active spot, you can level up that Giratina and gain access to the Pokebody Invisible Tentacles, which reads, whenever your opponent's Pokemon tries to attack, your opponent discards a card from their hand. If your opponent can't discard a card, that Pokemon can't attack. And obviously this Pokebody does not stat. It also has an attack called Darkness Lost that for 2 psychic and 2 colorless does 30 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for benched Pokemon. And if any of your opponent's Pokemon would be knocked out by damage from this attack, put that Pokemon and all cards attached to it into the lost zone instead of discarding them. Very potent effect if you can get it out and available. But of course, Giratina level X is not really the main attacker in this deck. It's an option. And even if you choose not to attack with it, it can be used still from the bench to force your opponent to discard a card each time they try to attack into you. For your attackers, you also have access to Dawnwing's Necrozma, Necrozma V, and Necrozma GX, all of which have their own little uses here and there. But the biggest of these 3, of course, is going to be Dawnwing's Necrozma. That has an ability that allows it to force itself into the active spot, and then with the aid of something like Moonlight Stadium or Floatstone, it can then retreat onto the bench and allow your Giratina, or whatever it is you've powered up with Psychic Recharge, to get into the active spot and start attacking. You also have Horror Psychic Energy, which damages the attacking Pokemon when the Pokemon it's attached to is in the active spot and is damaged by one of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks. And then you also have Spell Tag that says when the psychic Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. So Spell Tag becomes a way for you to put a little extra damage on your opponent's Pokemon and make some knockouts a little easier to take, or to take some extra knockouts here and there on weaker Pokemon. All in all, Malamar Box is not an especially crazy deck, but it is a nice, interesting deck, and it has a lot of toolboxy tools available to it to take on the meta. That's Malamar Box. Let's look at our next deck. Our next deck that we'll be fighting up against Malamar is Weezing from EX Deoxys with the Liability attack that puts your opponent's active Pokemon just 10 health in exchange for putting just enough damage on Weezing to knock it out. Fun fact though, more than likely you're going to be hitting your opponent's active Pokemon with some form of poison, either via Ariados, Skuntank, or Hypnotoxic Laser. So that little chip of poison damage at the end is going to finish off whatever Pokemon is in that active spot once Liability has taken effect, so you'll be taking your prize cards quite quickly. You have access to energies like Recycle Energy that bounces back to your hand when your Pokemon has been knocked out, and Rescue Energy that allows your Pokemon, the whole evolution line, to go back to your hand when it's knocked out. So you have quite a few little tools and lots of bits of consistency from cards like Artisan and Turffield Stadium to help you find your Coughings and your Weezings. All in all, this deck is fairly straightforward, and especially when it's headed up against 2 prize or 3 prize decks, it tends to be fairly favored in the price trade. That's Weezing, fairly straightforward, but also fairly potent and consistent deck in the right player's hands. Now that we've seen Weezing and we've seen Malamar, let's watch today's game. Our players are shuffled up and getting set up here. Weezing on the left, Malamar on the right. Dawnwing's Necrozma active for the Malamar player. Not the best starter, but not the worst either. To see a Coughing in the active and an attachment pass, that is rough. Malamar player really off to a good start there, getting a Giratina, getting an Inkay, 2 Inkay actually, out on that first turn, and then just going for a Sycamore. Sycamore drawing a fresh 7 cards after discarding the hand. Gonna hopefully find something good there. Finding a Battle Compressor, getting some psychic energies in the discard pile, most likely to use them later for psychic recharge. Also thins the deck, making it a little bit easier to draw into what you're actually after and not just a wall of energy. Giratina going in the active spot with the idea that it could just be knocked out and it won't be the end of the world because it can bring itself back. We do see here on the other side, the Weezing player now has evolved up into Weezing and has played down Turffield Stadium to do so, playing Marnie, getting some cards, getting a Spinnerack and a Coughing down, and an Aridos. Unfortunately, no Skuntank this turn. Would have liked to have seen Skuntank. Whiffing that Skuntank means that they cannot get a knockout with a Liability. That is a bit rough. We do see a Malamar on the bench there and another Battle Compressor. The manual attachment on the active, not ideal. Would have liked to have seen a Giratina go down to the bench so that it could be attached to and then double Psychic Recharged if both of those Inkays could evolve up. We do see yet another Sycamore drawing 7 more cards. I believe that was off of that Lapras. So we do see both Malamar, but unfortunately you're not going to be able to attach to the active Giratina. We can attach to the bench one, and you see it is happening here, but no attack this turn because of it. Jet Energy is attached to that active Spider there. I'm going to probably retreat out of it and into, yes, right into one of those Weezings. We are going to see a knockout here. That Liability is going to poison, sorry, the Spinnerack, the Ariados rather, is poisoned the Giratina and Liability has knocked it out. Well, technically that's not correct. Very technically, the poison has knocked it out and Liability put it down to 10 HP. But you understand what I'm saying. Giratina once again coming back down. The Dimension Valley making it possible to attack and take a knockout for that Malamar player there. Weezing once again going into knockout mode. And Windstorm discarding a Float Stone and another, the Stadium actually. Very rough. Lapras coming down, finding a Sycamore. Discarding a couple of energies. Oof. Do you see Artisan come down? Another Coughing, getting another Weezing set up for next turn. Ditto also going down. Ditto, a very strong card. Poison once again effective, and then Liability takes effect. Poison takes that final tick of damage, once again knocking out that Giratina. Dawnwing's Necrozma goes into the active spot, and it's Floatstone? Was that a top tech? The busted. We do see a Marnie. The just digging for a little bit of extra cards here, trying to find an energy most likely to attach to that Giratina on the bench so they can get enough energy to attack with it. Just going to throw the Giratina in the active spot and bring it back when we need it later. Unfortunately, not going to be able to attack this turn. Very rough luck for the player there. Weezing going to the active spot. Once again, just needs an energy to take a knockout. And see another Marnie. I believe that was off of Versus Seeker. See another Marnie. Both players a little desperate to draw cards at the moment. Do see a Recycle Energy come down and a Protection Cube to prevent it from knocking itself out. So making it a little bit harder to deal with. That Dawnwing goes to go to the active spot. We see Giratina come down once again. A Horror Psychic Energy has been found. So there will be another attack this turn. That Dawnwing's Necrozma can retreat with the Floatstone, and there we go. We see that Shadow Impact doing 130 damage, knocking out the Weezing. The Malamar player here gets to take another prize card, now down to just 3. Another Coughing comes down, an Energy Attachment on the bench, Coughing, and a Lava Ball, searching, of course, for another Weezing for next turn. Sycamore discarding that hand, drawing 7 fresh cards. Computer Search, going for a Protection Cube on the active Weezing to try to keep it in play for another turn if there is no knockout. To see a third Malamar, which means that Giratina will be guaranteed to be powered up. 3 Psychic Energy coming straight into play off of Psychic Recharge. And an Iono down to just 2 cards for that Weezing player. We do see the Giratina go to the active spot and take a knockout on that poor Weezing. Weezing, of course, that Rescue Energy making it go back into the hand instead of being discarded. So another Weezing is able to evolve right away. And that Ditto Prism Star, of course, was saved by Rescue Energy. So Ditto Prism Star, of course, going back down on the bench to evolve later. Weezing going to KO the Dawnwing's Necrozma for game, taking the last 2 prize cards, that Protection Cube and that Escape Board. Malamar, a very fun deck. That 2 prize Liability did kind of cost it the game there, but there were some rough plays, of course, from the Malamar player. Chose to burn a search card very early on a Giratina. Probably should have just saved it for a Battle Compressor. Giratina can come back on its own once it's discarded, so Battle Compressor throws in the discard pile, and then Giratina just brings itself back, allowing you to get an extra Inkai out or a Malamar out for the following turn, and getting those psychic recharges earlier on, which of course is really crucial when you need to get those energy attachments as fast as possible. But that has been today's game. I really do hope you enjoyed this particular game. I know I did. quite a fun little matchup there. Weezing, an extremely fun, extremely potent deck, does have some vulnerabilities against some of the bulkier Pokemon that can do some massive spread damage. Malamar, of course, does a great job when it sets itself up well, when the player playing it plays it well. But yeah, super fun decks. Very, very worth playing. If you were looking at picking up a deck for Eternal, I think Malamar is a decent choice. It may not be the most competitive deck in the world. It does struggle a little bit against decks like Ultra Necrozma and Copperajah, but all the same, Malamar is a very potent, very interesting deck to play for this extremely fun format. And if you happen to find yourself in the San Antonio area on February 10th, you can join us at Dragon's Lair at Alamo Ranch for the next in real life Eternal format tournament. Deck validation and registration begins at 11, with round 1 to start at approximately noon. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.